What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Big Ten college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey. Joining me, as always, is Colin Wilson. We have a gauntlet on our hands, an 18-team Big Ten. We're obviously going to dive into each and every team. We have now in the Big Ten, UCLA, USC, Washington. It's a lot to go through. I'm excited to dive into the Big Ten. It should be a fascinating year in this conference. Storylines galore, not only at the top. What's up, my friend? Are you ready to go through this?
I mean, we have true national title contenders in this podcast. You can't say that about the Big 12 podcast. I'm not sure you could say that on the ACC podcast. There's really only two, SEC and Big Ten. So here we go. We're ready to go.
Yeah, the most fascinating thing about this conference for me is that just think about how wild this is. The two teams that played for the national title last year are not among the top three teams in their own league to make the college football playoff in a year where it's expanded. So Washington and Michigan played in the college football playoff are not among the top four. There are three teams who are favored to make the college football playoff: Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. Can they finally do it? That's one of the major storylines going into the season. So let's start at the top. I think we'll split it up as I always do. And for full transparency, we're recording this last day of July. So we had a little bit after that. We'll try to talk about price ranges. But, if there is news that comes out between now and when this is released, just a heads up as to when we're recording it. But let's start at the top. Tier 1, Ohio State, Oregon, the two favorites to win the conference. Ohio State's around plus 150-ish. Oregon's around 2-1. To make the playoff, Ohio State, minus 650? Oregon sitting around minus 300. Let's start with the Buckeyes. Big news in the offseason is Chip Kelly comes in as a new play caller. We'll see what impact he has. I think that he should at least help improve the run game. You also could see some more tempo. But the big question surrounding the Buckeyes, who I think are going to have a really solid defense. Jim Knowles, year 3, ton of talent. This team, this is like what Clemson should be. Them, and then we're going to talk about Oregon next. A lot of returning talent. I think they have 20 players who've started 12-plus games. They also brought in a great recruiting class, and they also hit the portal for some reinforcements. You look at a guy like Caleb Downs, who comes in at safety to replace the departing Josh Proctor. Bringing Quinshon Judkins, you might have one of the best running back rooms in college football, if not the best. Bringing Seth McLaughlin from center from Alabama. So utilizing the portal, this team has a lot of talent. They do have some questions. You lose Harrison, you lose Stover, you lose both of your linebackers. But this is all going to come down to, and the defensive front, I really like the secondary. There are some questions, like linebackers. There's a lot of talent, obviously, across the board. They just have to get after the passer more consistently. The linebacker group has to come together. Nitpicking here, but just as far as if they want to reach the ultimate goal of this season, which is winning a national title, I think that they could still be fine in the Big Ten regardless, but to win a national title, they're going to have to find that quarterback. Can Will Howard be that guy? How do they use Devin Brown? Does one of the freshmen emerge? What are your thoughts on the Buckeyes sitting at over 10.5, minus 150? Their season comes down to 2 games, and even if they lose them, could still make the college football playoff. I have them we'll get to Michigan. I have them minus 12.5 against Michigan. Can they finally be Michigan? They'll host Michigan. Michigan is down this year. I think the game of year line is 9.5 there. But their 2 hardest games are going to be at Penn State. I think probably around a 3 to 4 point favorite. And at Oregon. I have Oregon as a small, tiny favorite. That's really what their season comes down to. What say you on the Buckeyes?
Well, let's come out of the gate here, because what I wrote up in our Big Ten preview that hit Action Network at the end of last week, I figured I would get some some pretty upset people with what I wrote about him, and I will stick to my guns here and we'll cover it. There are so many areas on the offensive side of the ball I'm seeing red flags, and it's registering with me that I don't want to think that this team is going to win this conference. I think there's one of those, they're set up to have one of those kinds of losses, where it just comes out of nowhere, whether it's Purdue or Iowa. There are a couple things that bother me, and they're almost always, all of them are on the offensive side of the ball. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Let's start off with Will Howard. There were reports rumbling around heading into media day that Will Howard had lost 30 pounds. Not that Will Howard had gotten the strength and conditioning coach and that he had toned up and lost some baby weight or whatever, that it was more of a sickly 30 pounds that he's lost, a severe, pretty weight drop. So everybody, and it's been confirmed, and he didn't show up to media days at all. He was not there to talk to the media. So nobody's gotten to see him since the Manning Passing Academy, where I was told by somebody that was there, yes, he's lost weight, exactly like what he looks from a muscle perspective. We don't know with his pads on, but he has lost weight since the spring game. His passing downfield in the spring game was horrific. And Ryan Day said it was a brand new playbook. He's never seen that playbook before. He went out there in spring, couldn't throw downfield. I would say that he can't throw downfield at all. He's generated 31 big-time throws at Kansas State, 35 turnover-worthy plays. His numbers fall off a cliff when he goes over 20 yards. If he has lost 30 pounds, that's going to hurt him. He has 1,000 career yards off designed runs. And what do you think Chip Kelly wants to do? He wants to put multiple tight ends and backs and H-backs up on the line and just power run. There's going to be a heavy influence to the run here with Chip Kelly. That gives me a little bit of a pause. What's going on with Walker Howard? Can you win the national title in the Big Ten with Walker Howard? Right now, I would say the answer is no. I didn't see anything with Kansas State that says that he can lead this offense or hit Emeka Ibuka downfield, who is your number one target and your leader in the locker room. Other problem that I have, their new center is Seth McLaughlin from Alabama. And if everybody doesn't realize who that is, he's the reason that Alabama didn't win the Rose Bowl. There were consistent issues with snaps, always ending up at Jalen Milroe's ankles, knees, ankles, on the ground. It happened at Auburn in critical times. It happened in the Rose Bowl at critical times. You want to go in and look at his numbers? Sure. He's got some very subpar run and pass grades per PFF, but the snap was horrific. And now who's your offensive coordinator? Chip Kelly. Well, guess what? He runs 90% out of the gun or pistol. There is going to have to be a snap back to Will Howard here if he's the quarterback. And I'm not sure, if Seth McLaughlin is the guy to do that. Ask Ryan Day, have you seen the yips? Nope, haven't seen that yet. Well, we'll see if we got a little bit of a Chuck Knobloch problem here with our center. So, and then Quinshon Judkins, the way that he left Ole Miss, there was some serious locker room heat on him. The offensive line, there's specifically some moments they weren't helping him get off the mat after he got tackled. There was some serious problems within the Ole Miss locker room, and Lane Kiffin and everybody else on that team did not have a problem when Quinshon Judkins left. So I say all of that there are an extreme amount of discord with, I don't think the quarterback is good enough to make the playoff or win this championship. The center gives me a lot of questions after what happened with Jalen Milroe last year. And Quinshon Judkins isn't really a locker room guy, and a lot of guys are there getting their money. So look, I can't get over the talent that they have that they've gotten through the portal, but there's, and I think Ryan Day made a great hire calling up his old coach when he was the quarterback at New Hampshire. He goes and calls Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly is a mentor to Ryan Day. They have a very close personal relationship. Ryan Day mentioned Chip's going to call all the plays. I have a really hard time letting go of the offensive bag, but it is 100% Chip's. So we're going to see how this turns out, because Chip doesn't want anything to do with being a head coach. He doesn't want to have group events. He just wants to coach X's and O's. So I think, there's some things, there's some red flags here. I don't like it. They should be about plus 220 to not make the college football playoff. They should be minus 280 to make the college football playoff. This number is insanely inflated. There's no way Ohio State, with the exact same win total projected, the exact same conference win total projected as Oregon, is double the price in the market. And Oregon, I don't even think it should be done running at minus 300. We'll get to them, but this number is asinine to make the playoffs. Plus 425 on the no. Thank you. I will take it, because I think there's 3 games on this schedule. They can't win. They can't beat Oregon. And I think Michigan is still going to run straight. Oregon. Yeah, they can. I don't think that they're going to win out in.
I don't think they're going to win there either. But do you trust James Franklin to take care of business against Ohio State? That's the question.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any value in the over or Ohio State in the futures markets. But it is, as far as make the college football playoff, it is interesting that how many teams do you think from the ACC go? One?
two max,
Yeah, but just what do you think?
one,
Okay. Big 12.
three.
You think 3 from the Big 12 go?
Yeah, a lot of people think two. I think it's three. They're gonna have a lot of 10-win teams. A lot of 10-win teams.
I don't think 3. I don't think 3 go. One group of 5. You think Notre Dame goes?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say 2 Big 12, Notre Dame, 1 ACC, 1 group of 5. 7 spots left for the Big 10 and the SEC. That's scary. If you're gonna bet against Ohio State, but and you're gonna trust James Franklin to get it done. That's the scary part of the bet.
Yeah.
I don't hate the value in it, but anyway, let's move on to Oregon. Oregon also win total 10.5. Not as much juice, -110. If you're gonna bet an over between Ohio State and Oregon, I would bet the Oregon over. Pretty similar schedule. I actually have them favored in every game because I have them a small favorite against Ohio State. And then they have a similar spot as what Ohio State does. Ohio State is going to be about a 3-4 point favorite at Michigan. Oregon probably around that same range when they travel to Michigan. The rest of the schedule, it's pretty easy. You got a rivalry game against Oregon State. You go to Purdue after Ohio State. Maybe the spoiler makers show up. But this team is loaded, back-to-back top 10 recruiting and transfer classes. You lose Bo Nix, you bring in Dylan Gabriel. I think as long as he stays healthy, avoids concussions, he's had one in each of the past years. That's an upgrade in my opinion. You lose Irving, but you're still fine at running back. You lose Franklin, you're still fine at wide receiver. They addressed all of their needs, secondary, etc. in the portal. This is a great portal class. They are loaded with talent. And the one question I have with this team for you is if you're going to bet on Oregon, are you ready for a Dylan Gabriel concussion and your boy Dante Moore to come in and take over? But the one question, I do want to see the interior of the offensive line. So they lost 2 to the NFL. Green, their guard, recently signed, and then Powers Johnson, he's the big one, their center. They're going to move Pancho Lalu. We have our Latu of this year, we had to pronounce, to center. He is strong. I mean, this guy has strength for days. He played last year as a true freshman, a couple different positions. He's going to take over at center. He had snap issues. I don't think that's a big deal in camp. So Powers Johnson had snap issues last year. So I just want to watch the interior offensive line. So they did lose 2 good ones, but their tackles are potential first-round draft picks next year. So this team's loaded all over. They avoid Penn State and Iowa. Season comes down to, Ohio State and at Michigan. Should win the rest of their games. Should be in the college football playoff. Should be a player to win it all. This is one of the 3 best teams in the country, in my opinion. Could argue it's the most talented. Right up there, with Ohio State's and Georgia's. What are your thoughts on the Ducks?
100%. I mean, this team is as good as anybody in the nation. They weren't prepared to play Georgia early in Dan Lanning's tenure here. They're ready to play them now. They have built so much in the trench, even at the end of the Mario Cristobal days, that they're able to reload and replace. Best set of offensive tackles outside of LSU, maybe, with a Johnny and Cornelius and Josh Connerly. They played 900 pass blocking snaps last year. They allowed a single snap and 3 quarterback hits in the entire season out of all of those snaps. The skill positions, I would argue, is deeper than anybody, especially in this conference against Ohio State. I trust their skill positions with Jordan James, 4.1 yards after contact. He's the primary red zone weapon. He had 10 rushing TDs. Slot, and as Tez Johnson, 87 targets, 3.3 yards per route run out of the slot. It is some of the most sickening skill positions from a depth perspective too. I mean, Evan Stewart was all the rage at Texas A&M. Now he's coming up, second, third, fourth on this depth chart here? All we did was talk about and bet on Evan Stewart last year at Texas A&M. So, his average depth of target last year was 14.4 yards in Bobby Petrino's offense. I can't even imagine what it's going to be here under Stein. So the defense is also Big Ten ready. All 3 levels project just as good on the defensive trench as Iowa and Penn State. The Ducks
Love
are ready
Caldwell
to go
from
here.
Houston. He's a stud. Bringing Harmon from Michigan State. They addressed their defensive line was going to be a question. defensive back was going to be a question, and they just bring in loaded
Yeah.
transfers with
Kobe
tons of
Savage.
experience.
Yeah, Kobe Savage from Kansas State. And then they get second team all Big Ten corner Jabbar Muhammad from Washington. I guess that would be Pac-12. But
I love
Jeffrey
Johnson
Bossa.
too at safety.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
mean, there's so much talent, and the schedule says you're essentially floating to 10 wins, right? We're not even going to question this. They finish under 10. The question is where are you going to get the most value? That's the problem. Like at minus 300, like we've really hitting the mark about what you're going to do with the playoff. From a percentage of chance to win the conference, they really should be more priced like 4-1 instead of like plus 215.
yeah,
The
I see
win
no
total
value
is
there.
right there. There's just no value anywhere. The best one, the best bang for your buck, and it's still not value, is to win the Big Ten at plus 215. That's the way that I'm playing them.
Yeah, I do project them for what it's worth. Like I project Oregon and Ohio State both around like 10-7-ish. And then
Yeah.
you can get the cheaper 10.5. So I show a tiny bit of value in 10.5, but it's basically
But
spot on.
which team are you feeling more comfortable with at quarterback, wide receiver, slot, and running back as far as explosive plays?
I mean, I like the Ohio State backfield a bit better. Wide receivers probably a wash. The Ohio State offensive line does have some questions. Like I know Grant going into last year, they lost both their tackles. The tackles are back this year, but they got to be better. But quarterback, probably the difference is these two teams are super close, my power ratings. But the difference is I trust Oregon's quarterback more now. I do need to see the Oregon defense come together.
Right.
That's just one thing that I want to watch because it's just a lot of moving pieces and gel, but they're going to be right there when it's all said and done.
And you know that as far as Dylan Gabriel's health, I think Dan Lanning learned a huge lesson 2 years ago by running Bo Nix ragged and getting his ankle all torn up 2 years ago. Bo Nix never left the pocket last year until it was important in the Pac-12 championship game. So I think they're going to max protect Dylan Gabriel for 90% of the schedule.
Yep. Yeah. 2 losses to Washington away from a potential by 3 points each. The first one they should have won away from a potential national title last year. All right, let's move on to the second tier, and that's going to be Michigan and Penn State. Penn State's 5-1 to win the Big Ten. Michigan plus 750. Let's start with the Nittany Lions. New coordinators here for James Franklin, who's looking to get to the college football playoff for the first time. Would have made it a bunch if the college football playoff was expanded in the past. He brings in Andy Kotelnicki, who we've always raved about in his offense, his pre-snap motion, just all of his offense is just a beautiful thing to watch. Great play caller. Brings in defensive coordinator Tom Allen, formerly of Indiana, going to run his 4-2-5, more 3 safety looks. They did lose 8 NFL draft picks. 3 offensive linemen to the NFL, including Fashanu, their star left tackle. So there are some questions on the offensive line. The biggest question, there's a lot of questions on this offense. Like I trust Kotelnicki to get it right. Like last year, they just wouldn't even throw it downfield until they faced it. Like it was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
But offensive line, there's some questions. Wide receiver, there's some questions. You have a good tight end. You did add Julian Fleming from Ohio State, but you lost a lot of guys too. You got some good backs coming back. Drew Hour's coming back. Can Drew Hour take that next step? This guy, regardless, he's going to be like, his name escapes me. I've been, who's the Will Levis? Like, regardless of what he does, he's going to be an NFL darling, right? Because he's got the arm strength, he's got the look. Yep. But can he take the next step at this stage? And he can make all the throws, but can he read defenses? Can he throw with more anticipation? So can he take the next step in this Kotelnicki offense, which will make things, I think, easier for him? The defense is loaded once again, but they did lose 6 to the NFL. They lose their defensive coordinator, Manny Diaz. They lost all 3 cornerbacks, so I'm curious to watch corner. They had Harris from Georgia, which should help. They lost 2 defensive ends that are really good at the NFL, and Robinson and Isaac. You'll move Carter down. They lose Jacob. So there's some losses on the defense that have to be replaced, but it should still be a very, very good defense. From a schedule perspective, they avoid Michigan, Oregon, and they host Ohio State. They can beat Ohio State. Look out, sky's the limit, but we all know James Franklin's track record in big games. 1-14 against Michigan and Ohio State when those teams are in the top 10. 1-14. Do get to host Ohio State. You got to go to Wisconsin the week before, avoid a potential look ahead there. The rest of the schedule pretty manageable. At West Virginia, I guess, in week one, the weird things happen in week one. Won't be the easiest game. And then you also have to travel out to the West Coast to face USC. You do at least get 5 Big Ten home games. What are your thoughts on the Nittany Lions? Over 9.5 juice to the over. It's basically 10. I think I saw one over 9.5 minus 172. I project right around 10, 10-1, 10-2. Yep. I love the Kotelnicki hire. I think the defense will still be good. Do you trust Aller, and do you trust this offensive line and receiving group to compete with the 2 elites that we just talked about?
I trust the coaching staff with the exception of James Franklin, because I'm not sure he's going to give Andy Kotelnicki the green light to call 3rd and 4th and short. It's been a serious problem with offensive coordinators in the past. Mike Yurcich had this problem. There's not a lot of offensive coordinators that have gotten in there and been able to take the full play calling away from James Franklin. You don't go out and spend this kind of money on Kotelnicki and not let him be able to call in the critical situations, but we will see. As far as the offense is concerned, you're right. They're missing some pieces there, and I'm not sure that they have the explosiveness where they need to be. I mean, Nick Singleton took a massive step back in yards after contact. Allen's rate of creating missed tackles, Katron Allen, his rate of creating missed tackles plummeted last year. Is that something with them? Is that something with the offense that was being run? We'll have to find out. The wide receiver room, the offensive line, they get a large number of contributions back. The arrival of Julian Fleming from Ohio State was a pretty good get out of the portal. We'll see what he can do in Kotelnicki's offense. But I will say this, Drew Aller in the spring game did not look like he had a grasp of Kotelnicki's offense. His passing anywhere over 5 yards was a little shady.
Brunkmeyer time?
You have to wonder how you have this kid who I stare at and like, who's going to be the NFL draft pick number 1 next year? Like, Drew Aller's name is up on the board pretty high. And when you look at his touchdown to TD, his touchdown to interception ratio, it's 23-1, but he only threw deep.
Throwing like 2-yard outs.
I know. We complained about that all year, and then they lost to Michigan, and then he was only allowed to throw deep 33 times after that, including the bowl game. Penn State came in 125th in pass explosives, and I think that's why there was a big change here with Kotelnicki. But again, like I said, let Kotelnicki call the money downs here. And from a defense, I always trust Tom Allen as a defensive coordinator. He's been great everywhere that he's been. They do get that Georgia flavor back in the secondary with AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber. You mentioned some of them, so I'm not worried. Especially Abdul Carter, 31 stops and 32 tackles, moving to edge. He is going to wreck teams completely. I think what you have to look at with the schedule is this is easily a 10-win schedule. I mean, if they drop any, and look at their history, right? If you take Ohio State and Michigan off their schedule, this team's a contender for the 14 playoff every single year. They're a contender for the Big Ten championship. Like, they're right there. I mean, they're literally stuck plays away, possessions away from winning these games. They hardly ever get blown out by by Michigan and Ohio State. Now the schedule gets a little bit easier. You're projected over 10 wins. We talk about how many teams are going to make it from this conference. Penn State's listed at minus 140 to make the playoff. It's a 10-win schedule by far. I'd be shocked if they fell to 9. And even if they fell to 9, I think they could still get into the playoff as the 11th seed. So give me Penn State here all the way. The schedule's way too easy. 10 wins, you're in.
All right, let's move on to Michigan, the defending national champs. They're plus 750 to win the Big Ten. Over under totals down to like 8.5. Over, heavily juiced. Minus 165-ish. They are replacing a lot. They had 13 players drafted. I think 17 went to the combine. 6 offensive linemen in the NFL. 6. And it's not a great transfer class. So it's not like they reloaded everywhere with transfers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know they're. I mean, you go through it. They lost it, especially on offense. There's a quarterback. Who's the quarterback? I don't know. Is it Orji? He can't throw the ball. Is it Tuttle? He stinks. There's some youth there that's also in the mix. You're going to have Lovelace at tight end. You're going to have Edwards at running back. Can he stay healthy? Can he be consistent? Those are definitely questions because Corum is gone. It was Johnson and Wilson to the NFL and Barner at tight end. So, all 5 starters are going on the offensive line. There's major questions here. This is one of the best offensive lines in college football for the past couple of years. Now, you look at the talent there. I'm not so sure. You lose some guys in the defensive backfield to, you lose Stan Russell to the NFL. Sabb transferred. Then Waller transferred out. Moore tore his ACL. Page is back. Will Johnson will lock down one side of the field. He's an elite corner. And then you do have Graham and Grant on the defensive line, Moore and Stewart. Defensive line will be elite again. That's like where you can rest your hat on like the defensive line, one corner that's going to lock everything down. The rest, there's a lot of questions here. So, the strength of schedule is also tough. They have Texas in the non-con. They have USC, both in the first month with all this change going on. And by the way, I didn't even mention Harbaugh's gone. Sharon Moore takes over. You have a new OC. You bring in Wink Martindale at DC. Expect the blitz all the time. You have to go to Washington. Major revenge spot for Washington. Oh, yeah, you have Oregon. And then you have to go to Ohio State at the end of the year. This is a very difficult schedule. I have them favored in 9 games, but like minus the close to just a touchdown favored in 2. And then dogs at Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon. How I want to bet Michigan. It scares me that there's so many open spots for the college football playoff that probably will come from the Big Ten and the SEC. I don't want to bet under 8.5. Feels disrespectful, even though I project them at like 8.8, 8.9. I'm lower than the market on Michigan, I think, just looking at game of the year lines and stuff. I want to bet them no minus 140 to make the college football playoff. I don't trust the quarterback. I don't trust I think that this team could go 8-4, then they're out of it. If they go 9-3, they're not necessarily in. So I'd rather bet no on to go to the college football playoff than bet the under 8.5, because there's a chance at 9 they don't get in. Because I think, like, say USC wins 9 games, they're in with their schedule. We'll get to them in a second. So I like Michigan no to make the college football playoff. Too many questions with this roster. And it all starts with the quarterback. And having Texas and USC in the first month when you have all this change, not ideal. Some of their hardest games are at home, which is a good thing. But I'm down on Michigan this year. I think they miss out on the expanded playoff. What are your thoughts?
They have 8 games where they're going to be pretty comfortable favorites. So you expect them to get to 8 wins. I'm not even questioning that they're going to get to 8 wins. Why? Because they're going to pull the Penn State treatment last year where they're like, we don't have anybody that can pass the ball. Tuttle's got 6 career touchdowns. Orgy, I think he could throw it backwards and be more productive. So
but are you 100% confident? Like, Penn State had dudes on that offensive line last year that the Michigan offensive line is a mystery this year. That's something like, can they just hand it off 50 times and trust their defensive line and Johnson at corner?
It's hard to replace Olu, but then again, it's hard to doubt that Sharon Moore can't run the ball because they missed nothing when Harbaugh went away. Nothing changed. So, but then again, Sharon Moore running his offense, he doesn't really need to steal any signals because it is a power run between the tackles. So we'll see what's going on with the sign stealing, see if there's an effect there. But I think when you look at the rest of the schedule, I've got them nonetheless as a touchdown favorite on the road against Washington. The Texas line is hilarious to me. It's floating +1, -1. It's kind of all over the place there. And I think what you're looking at is a complete X's and O's. Michigan is going to line up. They're going to run it between the tackles. And where is Texas? Did not replace Devondre Sweat. They did not get defensive interior help through the portal, which is one place that they needed. They're going to have problems producing a pass rush and defending the run from the defensive interior. The tug of war here is really going to happen in this market at 8.5. If you like 8.5 in the over, because there's a high percentage, like a 60% chance Michigan lands on 9 wins, a little bit less at 8, a little bit less at 10. If you think that they're going to fall on 9, there's about to be a huge tug of war. I have been told by multiple people that they're waiting for 8.5 before they come back in on the over. So if you like the over 8.5, get it at a good number because it's going to get scooped up before the season starts. I think they're a 9-win team stuck at best. That's the ceiling. They do not.
Do you think they get in with the 9 wins?
I think Penn State does and Michigan doesn't.
Yeah,
they're too limited. Offensive line, they do not have what you need to have to make, what should I say, aesthetically beautiful wins on the scoreboard, which is might fall into the committee while James Franklin's over here hammering down on the worst team in the world and letting Kotelnicki get 60 on the board. So no, they don't have a way to win with explosive plays, which I think knocks them out from a beauty contest standpoint.
Yeah,
I do think they land straight on 9. I think they have
to win 10 games to get in.
I think they land straight on 9 though. So then I'd say no playoff. They land straight on 9.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going with no playoff. But let's move on to the third tier, which is let's put teams that are around the 25 to 30 to 1 range in Iowa and USC. And these teams make a lot of sense to group together because they addressed, or at least think that they addressed, their glaring weaknesses of the past few years with new coordinator hires. Iowa has not had an offense. I mean, last year they were 132nd in points per game, somehow still won 10 regular season games. They finished dead last in the country with 247 yards per game and won 10 games. The previous high for wins in a season for a team averaging under 250 yards per game was 4. UCF in 2008. They go out and they get Tim Lester, who, you expect there's going to be at least a little bit more shotgun, RPOs, pre-snap motion. We'll see. We talked about Penn State and the handcuffs. We'll see if the handcuffs are on Lester. McNamara is back. How healthy he's a question because they did bring in Northwestern transfer Brendan Sullivan, who is in the mix, maybe an insurance policy against McNamara being healthy. The offensive line is experienced, but it was bad last year. They got to get better. This is not a vintage Iowa offensive line, so you hope that they take the next step, but they got no push. You look at any of the advanced metrics, 0 push across the board. There's still questions at wide receiver. They lost 2 of their better ones. Lachey at tight end is at least back. The defense under Phil Parker, it's always going to be good. Could be really, really good this year. They lose Evans and Lee along the defensive line. They're still going to be good up front. Maybe the depth's a little worse this year. Higgins and Jackson back at linebacker. Castro at the star position, or Cash is what they call it. He's elite. You lose Cooper DeJean, but you still have 4 others in the back end who started 6+. Really good safeties. Maybe CB2 outside is a question, but this defense is going to be elite. Special teams, I'm actually a little worried about. They have a really good special team coach. They're always good. But they did lose Taylor, their punter, who was basically their whole offense. Bringing in another Aussie with a big leg. But I'd worry about their kicker, a little shaky. We'll see. Looking at the schedule, it's pretty manageable. There no more Big Ten West, but no Oregon, no Michigan, no Penn State, no USC. They only face one of the top 5 teams. That's Ohio State. It's on the road. You're probably going to lose that game anyway. So you lucked out as far as who you're facing in the top. However, they basically just play like the whole middle of the Big Ten. They face teams that I have like 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. They do face Northwestern and Sparty, but then no Indiana, no Illinois, no Purdue this time around. When I look at their schedule, I project they're sitting at over 8, heavily juiced to the over, 33 to 1 to win the Big Ten. I project like 8.4. I haven't favored in 11 games, but 6 are by single digits. Look at Cyhawk game. Going to be a very small favorite there. Wisconsin, maybe around a touchdown favorite. At UCLA, small favorite. At Maryland, smaller favorite. Nebraska at home, maybe around a touchdown. Washington, maybe around a touchdown. So it's not like Ohio State and Oregon where they're going to be like 20, 24-point favorites in a lot of games. But they should be favored in 11 games, I think, by most power ratings going into the season. We'll see how things shake out. What are your thoughts on the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, I mean, they have one of the highest returning production marks of any team on both sides of the ball coming in here. And I think it's safe to say we're typical Iowa.
Defense, I have them.
Yeah. They are so fantastic on defense. And then from a special teams perspective, I think Maryland's the only one supposed to have a better group than them. So they're still going to bring it on special teams despite the losses. Offense is where we need to really focus on this podcast because Tim Lester comes in and I did a deep dive. You can go check out the Big Ten preview about what his offense was at Western Michigan. Almost every year that he was there, they were top 4 in the MAC until his final year. He had to get out of town because it didn't really work out the last year, but that's not his fault. Personnel happens. The MAC gets rated, all that. But Lester was a good offensive coach during his time at Western Michigan. You say, well, what kind of system does he run? He spent last year as a Green Bay Packers analyst after a 6-year stretch at the head of WMU. And Lester is going to use heavy pre-snap motion to confuse second-level defenders, a lot of Kansas type stuff. He runs offenses around 28 seconds per play. That is a very minimal uptick in tempo. You can see a little bit of Iowa games stuck. Maybe some over 26.5 is coming down our pipe. But I think the problem that I have with the offense is you have 2 quarterbacks that can't run the RPO. You like to go 4 verticals. You like to go RPO. Cade McNamara is out because of a torn ACL that happened on a run dive up the middle. And then you have Brendan Sullivan, who had 67 yards on the ground with designed runs for Northwestern, who transfers in. 0 explosives.
Time to bring Deacon Hill back? Is it time to bring the Deke back?
I feel like the Deke left before he could have gotten the maximum usage out of this kid. The offensive line does return more than 150 starts, so you're going to be able to protect them. And they do have a schedule. Illinois State, I mean, Iowa State will be tough, but Troy, there are some things in here where you're going to be able to tinker with the RPO and see that your quarterbacks can run it. And Stuck, I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting around in the middle of the year and maybe a skill position player is running the offense from a Wildcat perspective. But we'll see what Tim Lester does. Kirk Ferentz's answers on why he hired Lester were just so it really kind of sat me back in my chair and realized that, they just didn't make out some wild hire. I think that they got the guy that they want. And they definitely wanted head coaching experience in that coach's room, and that's exactly what they got. Phil Parker, 4.25, strict zone coverages on the other side. I was top 5 in preventing explosives. Wash, rinse, repeat. It's the same thing every year. Jay Higgins returns at middle linebacker. He's electric. 96 tackles, 54 stops. It's like one of the most in the nation. So you look at the schedule, Iowa State, Ohio State, Washington, that's the games that present the biggest challenges in the roadblock to a 10-win season. I project them at 8, actually like 8.04, so a little bit less than you. But the best bet you can make on this team, the best bang for your buck, is a conference win total over 5.5. It is listed at plus 160. Plus 160. Like 5-3 would be a subpar year with this schedule. There are 6 conference wins here. They have a full month of September to get the RPO working. They receive a bye week before they go to Columbus. And then all of their other games, they're going to be favored in pretty well. Some of them are double digits, like Michigan State, Northwestern, they're going to be favored in. I got them as 7.5 against Wisconsin at home. I got them going out to UCLA being favored by about 5.5 or 6. Maryland game, same thing. They get some rest. They get 2 weeks of rest. They go to Maryland. I have them favored by 6. There's a lot of comfortable favorite spots here. And, even look at the game of the year against Iowa. They're going to be a TD fave. I think there's a lot of spots here for wins. Yeah.
20 offensive touchdowns in 14 games last year. That's stunning.
Over 5.5.
Lester, you have a low bar to cover.
Yep.
I mean,
it's going to be fun.
That is stunning. All right, let's move on to the USC.
Are you going to let me hit? Are you going to let me hit overs on Iowa football games now? If it's like 27.5 without me like catching a rash of shit on Twitter.
You just said a skill position players going to be running the offense by midway through the season. Then you want to talk about how explosive this offense is going to be. College football is not the same unless Iowa's offense is the butt of jokes. So let's hope they not get too explosive here. All right, and look, there is some regression. Like people want, but I project 8-4. Like they went 5-1 in one possession games last year. But
it's Iowa though.
They always do. They're going to win. They didn't even win the turnover battle last year, but they usually don't. They don't get penalties. They're good special teams. They don't make mistakes. Well coached, at least everywhere but offensively. Anyway, let's move on to USC, who has had elite offenses over the past few years under Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, who's now departed for the NFL as the #1 overall draft pick. But their defenses have been Iowa-esque on offense. They just haven't had a defense, and that's what's really held them back. They were 7-5 last year before they won the bowl. So what do? They bring in Lynn from UCLA, who turned around that defense to, arguably a top 10 unit last year, and they were bad the year before. USC's hoping for the same results here. The staff is loaded. I mean, you want to talk about guys with pedigree. This staff, there's going to be anyone that turns around this USC defense. They have it.
Mm-hmm.
You do lose Williams, so what does that mean? Miller Moss takes over at quarterback, although Maeva, the UNLV transfer, is also there in the mix. I like Miller Moss. I know we backed him in that bowl game last year. I think he has some juice. You lose some backs to the NFL, but you bring in Marks. You have some talent. I mean, there's just talent all over. You lose some receivers to the NFL, but there's just talent. The offensive line has to come together. There's definitely questions there. They need continuity. There's talent. The defense, you bring in a bunch of Power 5 transfers to fix some of those issues and some of the losses that you had. Nicholson from Mississippi State. I love Arnold from Oregon State. 2 from UCLA that started, and Ramsey and Humphrey, familiar with the scheme. Special teams were great last year. Now everyone returns, led by Branch, their stud returner. So I think the defense is going to be improved, mainly because of the staff, mainly because of some of the guys they brought in, mainly because just like Iowa, it can't get any worse. The trenches, I do have questions about. Can they hold up in the Big Ten, and can they hold up with this schedule? It is brutal. One of the 3 hardest schedules in the country. They got Michigan, Penn State on the schedule, and LSU and Notre Dame in non-con. They only have 4 Big Ten home games. Also, I mean, you do have at UCLA. You do avoid the top 2 at least, but you don't face any of the bottom 5 either. So where are the gimmies? You got Utah State at home. I mean, Rutgers, they're going to challenge if USC is physical, and Rutgers is going to have a top 20, 25 D. Where are the gimmies? There's not many. Maybe one game that you're like, they're definitely going to win this game. And it got a little bit of a break with the travel, even with 5 Big Ten road games, because I said UCLA's won, Washington's won, and they do have a bye before the Michigan game. I have them favored in 8, but 10 or less in 7 of those 8. I project 7.1 over 7.5 flat. So I project a little over 7. There'll be dogs against LSU, at Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame. So I like what Riley did. He finally said enough with this defense. The schedule and the trenches just might hold them back. Like, are they going to be? What is this team going to look like by the end of the year when they go play Nebraska, UCLA, Notre Dame? Might be beat up to a pulp. What are your thoughts on the Trojans?
I absolutely love this team, but there is a factor with USC right now, especially in the market. It feels like you're walking into 3rd grade, like missing your clothes. Like if you were to get a USC to win the Big Ten ticket, like you'd walk into the classroom and everyone would point at you and laugh at you for wanting this USC team. I think they're fantastic. The speed on the outside cannot be replicated. There's a lot of teams that have Iowa and USC on their schedule back to back. I don't know how you replicate the speed of what USC has on the outside. You're completely right about the trench, though, especially offensive line, defensive line. They're going to have some issues there. The trench isn't completely ready, but this coaching staff, absolutely insane. So they went out and got D'Anton Lynn. I have seen D'Anton Lynn forever, and Lincoln Riley corrected me at Big Ten Media Days. So D'Anton Lynn is going to be there, but they went all out. I mean, they really dipped into the purse to go and get some of these coaches that are joining them here. You're looking at Entz coming in from FCS as a linebacker coach. He was at North Dakota State as the head coach. Now he's a linebacker coach. Houston coordinator Doug Belk is now just a secondary coach. Like, they have so much experience. And I think one thing that I took notice of as a numbers, fanatic, this team missed around 135 tackles last season. USC did on defense. They were horrible. They were never lined up, arm tackles, bad angles. D'Anton Lynn comes in. He helps coach for the bowl game against Louisville. He officially wasn't on staff yet, but he helps coach it. They missed 6 tackles in that game. That's it. It was their best defensive effort they had the entire season. Lincoln Riley admitted, I'd never seen anything out of our defense like I did out of the bowl game. It was a complete surprise to me. They are loaded. Now, Stuck, I mean, we're talking like worst tackling ranks, worst ranks, and just about everything on defense that are essentially pointing to fundamentals. If you have a coach that can come in and get them lined up and get them to take proper angles, you can cut ranks of like 130th down to 80th. That makes it provides a completely different dynamic for this defense. I think they're going to be able to pull it off. This coaching staff is insane. You mentioned Zachariah Branch. He's going to be great on offense. And I think the one thing that I love about USC is when you look at some of the trenches that they're going to go up against, I think that they can challenge for 8 wins this season. I think they're getting 6 wins in the conference, which you can get at plus money over 5.5 wins. That's my favorite bet out of USC. The good news for the offensive line.
I would bet. How about USC to make the college football playoff plus 5, like close to 450? Because like we just talked about it, they win 9 games with this schedule. Well, there's a lot of open spots for the Big Ten and the SEC. I think they can
why stop there? What if they draw the group of 5? If they draw some defense that can't handle the speed, they could win a game in the playoff. Let me say this about them, because I do think they can make the playoff. They're going to challenge for 8 wins. And the good news for the offensive line, which we're worrying about on this podcast, is that the best defensive fronts in the conference are Ohio State, Oregon, and Iowa. They don't play any of those teams. That is good news for this offensive line. I think the offensive line can get there, but it looks bad now. The Trojans are going to receive a bye week before 2 talented defensive fronts. Michigan, Nebraska, probably the 2 toughest they're going to play. They get a bye.
Maryland and Rutgers have good defensive fronts.
They do. They do. But I mean, I'm still rolling through the heavies here, right? The boys at the top of the list. But, cross-country travel, October 19th at Maryland. Look at the schedule too, Stuck. Here was the big worry. All these teams from the Pac-12 are going to come play in cold weather. What's after Maryland on October 19th? Nothing. Nothing. They do not have to go play at Iowa. They don't have to go play it in Ann Arbor. They don't have to play it, at
Yeah,
East
they're only
Lansing.
at Washington and at UCLA. It's like a
Yeah.
Pac-12
Yeah.
schedule in the
Yeah.
second
So
half of the year.
I love the overs. I love the win total over. I like the win total over, the conference win total over. I think they could make an appearance in the championship game. And I agree with you. I think they can make the playoff. I am very bullish on this team. I just got to trust these trenches.
All right, let's move on to tier 4. Tier 5 will be the bottom 10, which I think, all the teams that are 100 to 1 or greater.
Mm-hmm.
Amazingly, it's the team that was in one of the teams that was in the national title last year, Washington. We'll get to them in a second, and their complete rebuild. Nebraska. Let's go with Nebraska and Wisconsin in the 60 to 1-ish range to win the Big Ten. It's time to talk about Nebraska. Broken record. Going to have a really easy schedule to start. I have them favored in their first 7 games before they go to Ohio State. That game against Indiana, by the way, before Ohio State, especially if they're 6-0, is very trappy. This Matt Rule, it's year 2. Can things be different for Nebraska? Matt Rule in his previous stops, 10-4 and 11-3 in year 2. Has been a rebuild god. Got second-year coordinators here. And on paper, logically, this team should have some positive regression coming. 31 score losses in 6 years. Last year, unlucky in the red zone. Turnovers. Field goals. Couldn't make a field goal. Injuries all over. Skill positions. Offensive line. Upgrade at quarterback on paper. Raiola, the 5-star freshman, flipped him from Georgia. He should be the guy. Offensive line, loaded with experience. Just mentioned their defensive front. Really good defensive line with Polar Bear and Robinson leading the way in the interior. Top 10 in both yards per carry allowed and rush explosiveness allowed. I do have some questions about the back end of the D, especially, against really good passing offenses, because the pass rush it doesn't jump off the page. So can the secondary hold up if pressure isn't getting there? Amazingly, this team has the longest bowl drought among all Power 4 teams. 7 years. They're 0-24 against ranked teams over that span. The schedule, like I said, 7 straight should be favored in. Then it gets a little tougher. At Ohio State, UCLA at home, at USC, Wisconsin, then at Iowa. They played 4 teams. Their first 4 teams in the second half of the schedule are all also off buys, but you avoid Michigan, you avoid Penn State, you avoid Oregon. 5 of your first 6 are at home. Could start 6-7-0. It's all there. Will it come together? Over 7.5 minus 114, 60 to 1 to win the Big Ten. I project 7.4. Thought I was going to be in on Nebraska, but it seems like there's just always a tax on Nebraska. So I can't quite get there, but definitely an interesting team that last year lost 3 games by the score of 13 to 10. In those games, they had 12 turnovers. They were tied 10-10 with the ball late, threw a pick, gave up a field goal. 3 times, lost 13 to 10. They also lost 2017 to Sparty, had 3 turnovers, and they lost in overtime to Wisconsin. 1-5 in one possession games, -17 turnover margin.
Yeah.
It's all there. Can it come together? What are your thoughts on Corn and the Rule year 2?
Yeah, when Matt Rule got hired, I knew instantly that year 1 was an under and year 2 is generally an over. If you go and look at what he did at Temple and Baylor the second year he was at those programs, plus 10 additional wins. It really takes off after the players roster and the coaches all know what system it is that Matt Rule wants. Although I'm wondering if Marcus Satterfield is kind of off on his own. I don't know when we're going to see where it is that he's worth his money. -17 in turnover margin last year. That really helped their second order win total number get a power boost on the power ranking this offseason. No team lost more interceptions and fumbles than Nebraska in 2023. They need to have one of those fumble ball drills. Just put 2 guys on their back, throw the ball out, and let them fight over it. I mean, you lost way too much. We'll see how that turns around. Now, Dylan Raiola, best passer recruited to Lincoln in a generation. There's a lot of hype around this kid, but the biggest issue for Nebraska was a rank of 132nd in havoc allowed. The line returns nearly every player from the 2 deep depth chart, but you have to ask, is that a good thing when you have these kinds of ranks in tackles for loss, sacks allowed, things like that? Now, Satterfield has struggled to implement this pro-style offense last season. Even at his stop before that at South Carolina, he couldn't get it implemented with Spencer Rattler there. He has a quarterback capable of explosive plays, but I go back, Spencer Rattler had 3 games under Satterfield that were good. I love the defense. Tony White returns more than 70% of pressures and pass breakups to his 3.35. They rank top 25 in numerous categories: success rate, havoc, finishing drives. The defense is still the moneymaker on this squad, although the secondary projected to be about mid-pack in the Big Ten. That's going to be tough. The win total is completely decided on games away from Memorial Stadium this year. Back-to-back travel, Indiana and Ohio State. You mentioned that stretch. They play 4 teams off a bye in a row: Indiana, Ohio State, UCLA, USC. That's kind of brutal. November games out of Iowa and USC. Those could be, a little tough. And in conference play, the Huskers projected to win no more than 3 games. I've got conference win total under 4.5. I mean, they project as an underdog in their final 5 games. Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana, those are winnable. That's about it. The schedule's brutal.
Wait, underdog in their fine. Let me see. I was looking at the wrong team. I was like, no, wait, I have them -10.
Ohio State.
I have them favored against Wisconsin.
Okay. It's short though, right? It's short though, right?
I have them a field goal. I'm low on Wisconsin, which so you're going under
conference win total under 4.5
win total.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the other team that's in the 60-1 range, Wisconsin. Win total, either heavy juiced over 6.5. You can find a 7 out there as of this moment. That's all I wanted, was an under 7 on Wisconsin. I got it. Got it this morning. This team, for what it's worth, has 22 straight winning seasons. Did finish 6-6 in the regular season in 2022. Won the bowl to finish 7-6. The rest of the time, they finished over 500 in the regular season. But there's no more. Big Ten West schedule gets a lot tougher this year. Alabama in the non-con. You have Penn State and Oregon, both at home. You also go to USC, to Iowa. You have 4 easy home games, but the rest is tough. And 5 Big Ten road games. You draw 4 of the top 8. This team, the big offseason storyline, they have a lot of returning production. A lot of that is on defense. Tanner Mordecai is gone. You bring in Van Dyke from Miami. Maybe it's Braden Locke. You would hope it's Van Dyke and he takes the reins. That's where I think this team can reach its full potential. But Van Dyke, we've seen he has his limitations. The offensive line is similar to Iowa. It's just not the same as it usually is. The wide receivers, I'm not fully sold on. Why the air raid working in Madison with the weather too, culturally, that not sure it's working. The defense, look, you got Wohlers, you got Hallman, who's a lockdown corner. Bring in some guys at linebacker, have some juice. Defensive line's a question. Can they generate pressure? I have a question about their ability to do that. So there's some questions on this team. I'm not fully sold on them. The schedule is tough. I have them dogs of 7+ in 5 games. So the schedule is difficult. I'm not fully sold on this team. I went under 7. Wouldn't be shocked if they went 5-7 even and broke that streak of getting to bowls. What are your thoughts on the Badgers? Am I too low on the boys from Madison?
Well, we got in a breakout with Fickle at Big Ten Media Days, and I wanted one question answered. Why is the Phil Longo offense top 20 in havoc allowed and bottom 10 in explosives? How and step aside from that, like Phil Longo and a bottom 10 explosive offense from a pass and run perspective is just shocking to me. And the fact they're top 20 in protection. So yeah, they got tons of time to do whatever they want behind the line of scrimmage, and they're not getting shit done. Don't blink air raid with tempo. So Fickle, after asking some, surgical questions, he finally says to me, well, that comes down to player personnel and can't create separation and can't, get off the ball and can't do this. He essentially blamed it on the personnel that he has that can't run Phil Longo's offense. No shit. This is Wisconsin. Your offensive line is all supposed to be 350. Your running backs are supposed to be 275 pounds. What are we doing? We've wiped out the 2 tight sets. They were, 35% 2 tight sets, 12 personnel. They're down to 5% last year. It's not the offense that's going to work in this footprint, geographical location of the nation.
And I digress. Too.
You better hope Braden Locke's not the quarterback here. Double the amount of turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. And TVD,
Van
who
Dyke loves himself some turnovers too, though.
yeah, 54 touchdowns, 23 interceptions, a lot of turnover worthy plays there. Started to clean it up a little bit last year. The fifth-year quarterback has a completion percentage drop in half with a crowded pocket. That's where the problems are stuck. I mean, we're talking like a massive drop when he gets a pressured pocket. 3 offensive linemen returned to that offensive line that was top 10 in havoc allowed. There's no real big skill position pieces here. The best thing that we have is an offensive line to keep Tyler, but Tyler Van Dyke is going to have an on-target ball of top 10 for Wisconsin to have any kind of explosives whatsoever, and I just don't see it. Now, the defense is going to excel against the pass. Wisconsin could struggle against run-heavy offenses with this defensive line that they have in, so look out for that on the
At
schedule.
Rutgers.
Yep. And finding 8 wins, I can't find it on the Badgers schedule. They're going to be more than 2 touchdown underdogs in 3 home games. I'm sorry, 2 touchdown underdogs, 3 home games, Alabama, Penn State, Oregon. I'm not even counting them in even close to winning those games. So 9 is your ceiling. Then I got road underdog spots of 6 points or more and travel to USC and to Iowa. So now your ceiling 7.
Trappy spot at Northwestern too. At Rutgers,
yeah.
bad matchup. At USC.
You only have 3 heavy favorite spots.
Minnesota, at Nebraska too. We didn't even mention them.
Yeah, Minnesota, Western Michigan, South Dakota. And I don't, that's it. I got under 7. It was one of my biggest plays in all the Big Ten write-up. I love under 7 here. I project 5.9. This offense is. I mean, if Fickle is admitting to me I worked on him for a couple questions. Then he's finally, we just don't have the personnel to run long. Okay, I've been waiting for that, Luke. Tell me the whole time. Yeah, they don't have the offense to run what Longo wants.
Yeah, I'm at 6.15. Love the under there. All right, let's move on to tier 5, which is the remaining 10 teams. We'll go a little quicker for these teams. Start with Maryland over 6.5 plus 115. I want to bet the under on Maryland with Talia gone at quarterback. My numbers just come out to like 6.3. Wish I would have got it earlier. But there's a lot of questions on this team. First, at quarterback it's probably gonna be MJ Morris, but Billy Edwards, who probably will still get time and he'll be short yardage running. He'll be vulturing touchdowns, or maybe Cam Edge is still in the mix. Definitely a quarterback battle that will go on up until the start of the season. Hemby back at running back. Your wide receivers are good, but it's the offensive line. You lost 5 starters, 2 to the NFL, and who do they replace them with? I'm very worried about the offensive line.
It's projected as the worst. It's projected as the worst in the Big Ten, the offensive line.
There's some D2 guys, some underwhelming guys from Buffalo and Purdue. It's a big drop off on this offensive line, and the quarterback's going to be a big drop off. So who cares if you have great talent at wide receiver? And so I think this offense could take a major step back. The defense, it's going to be good up front, but there's some questions on the back end. After you lose Bladen Still, you also lost Barham to Michigan at linebacker. They need to find a way to generate more pressure. They'll still be strong against the run, but against teams that can throw, they're going to struggle there. So, yeah, I think that this is. By the way, all 3 of the offensive linemen they lost are now all on NFL rosters. They're outside the top 100 in returning production. They are out of the East, the good news. So they avoid Michigan and Ohio State for the first time. And that's important because they're 0-34 versus ranked Big Ten teams. So, it is a cake first 6 games, which is good news because you're trying to break in a new quarterback, new offensive line. So, you have UConn, Michigan State, at Virginia, Villanova, at Indiana, Northwestern to start the season. And then you host USC. I mean, there's a chance they could be 6-0. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to be looking for chances to fade them. You do have 2 sure losses at Oregon and at Penn State, but I do have them favored by 3+ in 7 games. The others, smaller dogs, and then obviously the losses against Oregon and Penn State. But the back 6 is very tough. So what can they do in the first 6? Can they go 6-0? That's probably going to determine what their win total does. So I'm only at 6-3. Wanted to fade them. We'll look for spots to fade them during the season. What are your thoughts on the Terps?
Yeah, I think game 5 and game 6 are going to be wake-up calls after this very soft 4-game start. Even going to Virginia, I don't think they're going to have a problem. But once they get to Northwestern, once they get to Indiana and Northwestern, you're essentially facing JMU's defense, and then you're facing David Braun. I think it's going to be a wake up call for this offense, and they better get it figured out who's going to win the quarterback position. Billy Edwards completed just 6 of 20 in Terrapin's bowl game last year against Auburn. Yeah, it was never good. It's never been good with him throwing. And then you look at MJ Morris from NC State. It's like, I know he's won you and I a couple bets down there for the Wolfpack, but he has more turnover worthy plays than big time throws. You just can't replace 3,300 passing yards, 77 career touchdowns with Talia Tagovailoa. I mean, that was a big loss, and Loxley talked about it for his full 15 minutes up at the podium at Big Ten Media Days. It's just an identity that they're losing completely. Receiver group is fine. They do lose Deshaun Jones, but like you said, they'll be okay. 6 of their top 8 targets are back. The defense, though, ranking top 20 and limiting explosives. We'll see if that 3-3-5 front can keep it going. Linebacker Ruben Hippolyte's going to be back, generated 66 tackles last season. The problem with this schedule for me is I can't get to 7. I see very comfortable favorites in 4, and then I see Minnesota, Rutgers, Indiana, the coin toss games that can make or break the season. Couple of those on the road. They've got to have everything go right to get to 7. Once you get to the back half of this schedule, you're donezo. This November schedule, you're donezo. Oregon, Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State. I don't want to face Rutgers anywhere on the schedule. If you think that's a win, by the way, welcome to 2024. Rutgers is not a pushover, actually a pretty strong team. So if they can't get it in the first half of the season, they're not getting it at all. But I like under 6.5 here. I project them at 5.9.
Yeah, the only thing with that Rutgers game is can Rutgers throw? Because Maryland still should be good against the run. That's what would concern me. And then Iowa. Well, Iowa will be able to throw. It's under or nothing for me. But we'll be looking to fade this team early, especially as a favorite, right? They're going to be favored early. I'll be looking to fade them. So I think the offensive line is going to be a mess. You mentioned Rutgers. Let's talk about the Scarlet Knights, who last year they went 6-6, then they won a bowl game. Big step for the program. Went 2-0 in one-possession games, including the bowl game, +5 turnover margin. This team was all set up to take even another step this year, and their defense is going to be, I think, top 25. Finally, Rutgers has a schedule that isn't absolutely brutal. They avoid Penn State, they avoid Michigan, they avoid Ohio State, Iowa, and Oregon. This is a team that perennially has just had a vicious schedule being in the East. It's the easiest in the Big Ten. It's well-deserved, Rutgers, after suffering for all those years. They avoid each of the top 5 teams. Hardest games at USC, and then at Va-Tech in the non-con. I don't have them as a dog. It's shocking to say on a Rutgers schedule of more than 10. Like, usually you have Rutgers +28, +35, +30 in 3 games. I wanted so badly to bet this over, and it's over or nothing for me. And I project them at 6.8. So over 6.5 plus money, definitely a little bit of value. Washington is a dream spot, by the way. Like, there's some dream spots I have on the schedule. There's a bunch of coin flips too, I should mention. The reason I don't want to bet the over, a couple of reasons I'll tell you. The D is going to be really good. They have a stud back. Monagai, who's back. They're going to be super run heavy. They were top 10 in run percentage last year. Their wide receiver should be better this year. I just don't trust the Greek rifle. I know he knows Kirk's system, but Kelly McManus, he's not good. So the other thing is there's a couple spots on the schedule, and if you can't stop the run, I want to bet Rutgers. But the Washington game, oh baby. If Washington is 3-0, flying across country, the week before, they have revenge at home against Michigan. And that game's around a pick, oh baby. Rutgers slam spot. So the other thing is that last year, Rutgers, they got to a bowl and they were like bowl eligible, and they said, let's party. And then that was it. Until they got to a bowl and they were fine. So I really worry about their last game of the season. So I have them favored at Michigan State. But say they get to 6 wins by beating Illinois. Do they check out for that game, right? It's like, hey, we got to another bowl. You're not really playing for anything. And then Michigan State, under Jonathan Smith, who we like, they should be improved, especially at the end of the year, right? So that game being at the end of the year scares me a bit. So like Rutgers, will be looking to bet them. They should get Powell back before the season, by the way, and he's important at linebacker. And the other thing is though, which another bullish case for Rutgers is who can stop the run. And you look at their schedule. Minnesota should be decent, Maryland, Nebraska, but like there's not a lot. Even Bob Peck is not. I'm worried about their run day. There's not a lot of teams that you look on the schedule and you say they're going to shut down the run. So I'm bullish on Rutgers, but there's a couple nuanced things why I can't get there for them getting to 7 wins. It's the quarterback. There's some spots I'm just going to bet them in season, and the scheduling nuances as well keeps me off. But I project 6.8. I show a little value in the over. I like this team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm definitely there, and I'll see if I can sell you on it. I would probably take a flyer on Rutgers to make the conference championship game. The problem is they're in New Jersey. They're in New Jersey, and it's not being offered. So I wish I could talk about that. But I love Rutgers a lot.
Manus going to the Big Ten championship. Get the fuck out of here.
Come on. Hold on now. Hold on. I didn't say I would have to have odds. I'd have to have like 11 to 14 to 1, but I didn't say it's going to happen. But I love this team that much. And listen, Rutgers finished with one of the highest rush rates last year at 63%. They found the highest rate of success with inside zone, man run concepts. So hopefully that will, help out with Kyle Monaghay coming back, a heavily experienced offensive line. He had 3.6 yards after contact, 73 missed tackles created. He's an elusive breakaway powder keg. It's bad that Kevin Wimsatt's gone to Kentucky. We could have used some depth here at quarterback, but let me change your mind on Nathan Kaliak-Manis, right? 4.2% turnover worthy play rate wasn't good. We had some money on him, I think, in that week 0 game. A little bit embarrassing. It never really got it in the passing offense. But if you dig in his stats, 295 passing attempts at Minnesota, 112 pressure drop backs. I mean, we're almost at half, Stuck. Almost at half. He's got hands in his face. This offensive line is going to protect him. I'm willing to give Kaliak-Manis benefit of the doubt. Let's see what you can do when you have a clean pocket. Now, on defense, we got a nickel package, moderate 30% blitz, 35% man coverage. That's a really high man coverage rate for Schiano there. Strength of the defense is a secondary despite losing Max Melton. Less than 70% of the pressures and tackles are back in the front 7. It's still a pretty high number above mid-FBS numbers. And their linebackers, Desmond Igbenson and Mohamed Toure, they bring the havoc on this defense. They're Schiano. They're just a mold of what Schiano wants at the linebacker. I think they cruise in their opening games. Howard, Akron, before they have their first bye. They have a bye coming into Virginia Tech that early. That's a huge advantage. Then they have an advantage in November 9th game. Again, coming off a bye week, facing a Minnesota team on back-to-back travel. It's a revenge spot for the offensive coordinator. It's a revenge spot for the quarterback here. Their final 4 games, I think, are a sweep. I mean, there's hedge spots in there that we could use. I didn't think we'd ever start talking about load management when it came to Rutgers football playing Michigan State at the end of the season. But I like over 6.5. It's at plus 120. You and I recording this is at plus 120. I project them 6.7. I will take that plus money juice. I will keep my eyes on that November schedule, which offers me 4 different opportunities to hedge out of that win total. And that is what you want when you have a season-long bet. Find me outs to get out of this. You've got them on this schedule in November.
All right, let's move on to a team I love, and that's, you love Rutgers. I do like Rutgers. I'll be betting them a bunch, I assume. Obviously, price dependent, but a team I love and my favorite over in the Big Ten, Indiana Hoosiers, baby, over 5.5. This is my favorite over.
Did you hold on before? Did you catch any Curt Cignetti at the podium? Did you at all?
Yes,
anything?
Amazing. Yeah. He was amazing. Into some clips. Mitchell, you can note some of your favorites in just a moment. But this is Curt Cignetti. Just trust him. Trust him that he's going to get bowl eligible. That's what I'm doing here. I project 5.9 for what it's worth. But I think this team is going bowling. Their schedule is extremely manageable. Easy first 6 games. FIU, Western Illinois, at UCLA, likely a loss, but could win that game. Charlotte, Maryland at home, at Northwestern. I'm very low on Northwestern. We'll get to them in a second. Nebraska at home, Washington at home. I think they can win that game. At Michigan State. This is, going into the second half of their schedule. Michigan at home, they could win that game. Am I going to talk myself into Indiana going to the conference championship? You're talking yourself into Rutgers?
How great is getting Ohio State the week before the game? I mean, that's the perfect spot that you want to get them if you're going to get the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean, they'll probably be a 4-touchdown underdog, but yeah. And then Purdue, revenge against Purdue at home. So look, I have 3 free wins. They'll be dogs of 7+ 3 times. That's it. The rest, there's a bunch of coin flips in there, but they have not 9 winnable games. They face only 2 of the top 6. They have 8 home games, and 2 of the road games are against Northwestern and Michigan State. I love the skill positions. I love Rourke at quarterback, who they brought in from Ohio. It's a hard team to project because they're bringing in a lot of guys from JMU. It's Signetti, his coordinators, and then he brings in 13 guys from JMU. It's, you're going to have, 2 transfers on the D-line from JMU, 2 transfers from JMU at linebacker, 2 ODU transfers in the secondary. So it's a lot of group of 5 guys making the step, but I like this roster. I trust Signetti. They did lose 3 offensive linemen to Power 4 teams, which isn't great, but they had a Wisconsin transfer, and guess what? They bring in 2 JMU guys. So I'm really curious to see how this works, but I think the schedule works to their advantage. They also, 5 of their first 10 opponents also have new coaches going through a lot. Like I mentioned, 5 Big Ten home games. You avoid Penn State, you avoid Iowa, you avoid Oregon, you avoid USC. I like this team a lot. I think they're going bowling. Losing Minor after spring does hurt, but I'm trusting in Signetti. What are your thoughts? Never had a losing season.
I think he's the best interview in all of college football. I mean, some of the things that he said before Big Ten Media Days and then during it, he's dropping bullshit at the podium saying most coaches coach their kids, it's okay if you didn't make this tackle, or it's okay if you finished in this spot. Bullshit. He wants to win at all costs. And then he started making fun of the media. He's like, I got picks. Indiana's picked 17th out of 18 teams. I'd just like you to know, I've walked into these kinds of things before, and my team has always picked first in the conference. I have never finished second to last in my life. He goes, just saying. I mean, he's just so full of vitriol that nobody's giving Indiana any respect here so early, man. He's already fired up. We haven't even played a damn snap. Signetti's going to be great. He's fresh off of leading James Madison to 19 wins over 2 seasons of FBS play. That is extremely impressive. The Dukes ran a balanced attack on offense, 52% of snaps running the ball using inside zone. Curtis Rourke was tailor-made for that. Oh my God, do we love the Ohio Bobcats, and we love Curtis Rourke, brother Nathan Rourke. We love all the Rourkes. And so, what the Bobcats were able to do, that's exactly what they're going to do here. They had a high successful rate of zone read using their quarterback. Rourke is tailor-made for this. He tallied 50 passing touchdowns to just 16 interceptions in 4 seasons for the Bobs. And the offensive line returns more than 80% of snaps from a season ago, and the portal really helped kind of build some of those in. Left tackle Hoosier holdover Carter Smith allowed just pressure on 2.3% of snaps. The blind side should be okay for Curtis Rourke. No injuries are expected. Skill positions are loaded by JMU. I don't know if that's good enough, but I can say the same thing on the defense, right? We have a huge influence from JMU. 5 projected starters come with Signetti. Edge Mikal Kamara produced 41 hurries, 8 sacks for the Dukes, but we are stepping up in competition. It's really hard to just look at that defensive line, the competition they played, and say, is that going to translate here? Signetti, like you said, he's never had a losing season. He's in a great situational spot against Ohio State. Heavy favorites in 3 non-conference games. I project him as a short favorite in 3 conference home games against Purdue, Nebraska, Maryland. My numbers put this win in the 6s. Current market right now, over 5.5 plus 100. Go out and get it, everybody. I mean, Signetti is an absolute animal. The schedule is manageable. And I think that we are witnessing the start of something big for an Indiana program that has decided to put money in NIL, put money in the transfer portal, and put money in getting this coaching staff right. So I'm behind the Hoosiers here. They're making a bowl, absolutely making a bowl. Over 5.5 is the play.
Hoosiers. Here's my favorite one from his press conference.
So you were just talking about, meshing the recruits you're getting and some of the guys you kept. Where does that process start? I mean, what
do you mean? I don't get the question.
Well, when you recruit them, how do you sell your vision of your culture? I mean, what's the...
Who are you talking about? The high school guys, the transfers? Who?
All of the above. I mean, how do you...
It's pretty simple. I win. Google me.
All right. So let's move on. Hoosiers over. Going bowling, Indiana. We're gonna bet Indiana in the bowl.
How high do we have to get in our careers, like notoriety, before you tell someone to Google me? I mean, that is just fucking balls of steel on the table.
Amazing. Make a bowl, and then we're gonna bet you in the bowl, Indiana. All right, let's move on to Washington. Fresh off an appearance in the national title, 100-1 to win the Big Ten. They went 14-1 last year, only lost to Michigan. Over sitting at 6.5. My error close to even money now. Washington has taken some under money. They went 8-0 in one possession games, 10 wins by 10 or less. But it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, people are like, regression. It's a brand new team. Like, there's not regression on the Husky. The Huskies due to start losing games. Regression is like, it has nothing to do with this new team. This is a brand new team.
Yep.
So like, you can't look at anything that happened last year. Returning production on offense, dead last in the country. No returning starters. Defense, 2, 3. I mean, there's like some guys. They have some guys. Their linebackers, returning starter. Bruner started some. You know, you have some guys in the back end with experience. Cam Fab, Jackson. So there's some pieces to work with on the defense. You bring in Prysock from Arizona. The big news, of course, is that it's Jed Fish coming in to take over for DeBoer, left for Alabama. Brennan Carroll comes with him from Arizona to take over as the offensive coordinator. Steve Belichick taking over as defensive coordinator. I mean, this is a completely new team. I don't know how else I can put it other than they have 46 new scholarship players, an entirely new staff, moving to a new league, 21 of 22 new starters. They lost a quarterback, a running back, 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and 2 offensive linemen to the NFL. Only team to face 5 of the top 6 in the league, all in the final 7 games. There are maybe some TCU vibes here after they got to the national title, and then they had a fall off. What did they finish, 5-7? But I thought I was going to be all in on this under, and I'm not. They should be a touchdown plus favorite in their first 4 games. That helps with all of the change. They'll be a touchdown plus dog in 4 games. They have like 4 coin flips. Late buys, I think, do hurt, just because I think that they could use one like early to work on some stuff because there's so much newness. Harder travel is also worth mentioning. Only 6 true home games here. They play Washington State and Seattle. But there's a chance for them to get off to a fast start here. And that Michigan game, man, they're going to have that game circled. And I think Michigan is down this year. So, and I love Jed Fish. Will Rogers is going to take over at quarterback. You bring in Coleman at running back. There's some talent at wide receiver, even though, I mean, it's going to be a big drop-off. He lost 3 to the NFL and 2 tight ends. Offensive line, big question. Super young, very inexperienced. But Fish is great. I love both coordinators. They're both sharp. So I project 6.4. I want to sell Washington, but just can't. I think the market has gone too far on selling them, and I'm a big, huge Fish guy. So, yeah, it's just all about this start. Like, can the Rutgers spot is... But I think there's a chance they lose at Rutgers and then beat Michigan. So, look, with this staff, they could have this team rounding into shape by the second half of the season, and that's when the schedule gets really tough. So, pass for me on Washington. What are your thoughts?
I was way too early on the win total. I took an over a few months ago. I thought with the announcements of, the fact that they didn't get the slew of skill positions like Noah Fafita and Tetarola from Arizona, I thought the hate had gone a little bit too far in their win total, and I was happily to dive in the 7s. Now we're down to 6.5, and this thing just keeps moving. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there's some TCU vibes here, but at the same time, Will Rogers is second best passer in SEC history, 11,500 yards. I mean, he worked exclusively out of the air raid under Mike Leach. He's going to move to pro style now under Fish. I think he's going to be able to handle it just fine. Running back Jonah Coleman, I mean, the junior is electric in his college career, 4.4 yards after contact. He had 19 runs of 15 yards or more. He's got breakaway speed. And wideout Jeremiah Harner arrives after 3 years at Cal. He averages an explosive 2.3 yards per route run. I mean, they have pieces on offense. It's not like they're completely dead. It's not like it's completely empty. So, the pass protection and the run blocking for a new offensive line, that needs to be under a microscope. You mentioned there's no bye week early. Well, they got Weber State and Eastern Michigan to get it right. So it's probably as close as you can get to bye weeks. Although I got to study Weber. Who knows if they're still the defensive powerhouse that they've always been in the FCS level. So I think the good news for the offensive line is the first dominant trench that they will see comes October 5th against Michigan. Even Northwestern, they're more heavier on the back end. They are the front end. So I think they've got some times to get this ready. Rutgers will be tough too, but Michigan really is the first dominant defensive line that they'll see. They're going to be and the whole Belichick thing is like, I mean, what a pull. He ran an extremely complex defensive playbook when he was with the Patriots. They're going to try to bring, everything out of there. I mean, I worry about the defense grasping the playbook of Steve Belichick versus I don't think Steve Belichick is going to like put in a base defense and say, just try to learn the base defense. So we'll see how that works. Edge Isaiah Ward brings 30 pressures from Arizona. They have a Montana State transfer, Sebastian Valdez, who had 92 pressures in his 3-year career. That should play out. Montana State, generally one of the best in the nation, FCS. There is a defensive line rebuild. I hate the trenches on both sides of the ball. I hate teams that are rebuilding in both trenches, but any competent rushing attack probably keep this defense on the field for a long time. They've got to get that figured out from day one. They're going to be double-digit favorites over first 4 weeks of the season. I think the best shot of an upset there is Northwestern being about 15-point underdogs. I don't think it's going to happen. So that you can get 4 wins, you can get some experience, you get some trenches, some work, and then you can see what Fish can do. If he's
Look
still
at
got
you
the team.
coming around on my boy Jed.
Well, I mean, I took him in an over. I took like an over 7.5, like
I
back
know.
in
I'm saying
March, and I was
you're
just
all
like,
in. You're all in on Jed now.
I like him now. Coin flips at home against USC, on the road against Iowa. We'll see if they can pull that off. But you're right. If you can get a game of the year on them against Michigan, it's a great spot. But I need some defensive line to show up here. I need the trenches to show up here. That's the big problem. But they're going to be very well coached. We know that.
A team that might not be well coached, Illinois, over 5.5, sitting around.
My boy.
Money. Your boy, Bert. It's one of my favorite unders. I'm in on under Illinois. I think their ceiling 6. I'll make Bert prove it to me. And they were so poorly coached last year, by the way. Penalties, just lack of discipline. This roster, Illinois is going like this. And they're just not keeping up. I mean, look at the recruiting. Look. First of all, it's a quarterback, Luke Altmaier. He's going to take over. Paddock's not walked through that door now. He was great late. Altmaier, he does some things with his legs. He's a turnover machine. I like their running back, Fagan, but the offensive line, major questions. Lost both tackles, including their stud Adams. Lost 2 good receivers. Tight end of the NFL. Look at their wide receiver room. It's bad. Look at their offensive line I have concerns about. Their defense just hasn't recovered from after Walters left. They lost all those pros in the secondary. Their defensive line now is worse. Their linebackers are not that talented to me. I mean, their D-line was gutted. You lose Newton and Randolph to the NFL. Depth's a big question. They could be beat up by the end of the year for their easy 4-game stretch. I have them with 2 free wins. Central Michigan and Eastern Illinois at home. I have them dogs of 7+ 6 times. The rest, they're coin flips. I'm not a fan of this team. This is one of the 30 hardest schedules. They do have 7 home games, and none of them are out of reach.
Right.
And then you get Northwestern in Soldier Field at the end of the year. And there's some continuity on the staff. I think they're one of only 2 Big Ten teams with the same head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and quarterback, if you include Altmaier. But I project like 4.9. This team is just not that talented to me. There's just not a lot of guys that I'm like wowed by. And I think they're going to take a step back. I'm in on under Illinois. What are your thoughts on your boy?
Yeah,
Bert?
Bert has failed to reach 6 wins 2 of the last 3 seasons. I think the axe is coming for him at the end of this one. 7 games on the 2023 schedule were decided by a margin of 6 points. Bert went 5-2 in those games. I don't know if you can keep that up, especially with this cast. You mentioned Caden Fegan at running back. He's a decent running back, but he logged just 4 runs over 15 yards out of 95 carries. That is half of what the average rate is for breakaway explosive runs. So he just doesn't have the juice, or at least he didn't show it last year. On the defensive side, this Aaron Henry, this 3-3-5 defense sends blitz on 47% snaps. So you're ultra aggressive. It doesn't always pay off, and it doesn't show in the numbers that it's working. The defensive line is a complete rebuild. There's no expectations of creating a top 50 pass rush here. Middle linebacker Dylan Rosiak returns as the leading tackler, but he also leads the team in missed tackles. That's a really bad combination. Illinois, they're going to be favorites in 4 games this season. That's it. Take on those 2 that you mentioned before. Purdue and Michigan State are going to be really small favorite spots for Illinois. But if you were to put Jonathan Smith and Brett Bielema, just throw them out on the field and see which one could coach better, I would not sit around and put my money on Brett Bielema in that aspect. But another 4 games are completely out of reach. They're not beating Kansas. They're not sniffing Penn State. No Oregon, Michigan, no way. The win total likely comes down to the games against Nebraska, Purdue, Minnesota, And Illinois has just got serious issues stopping the rush. The defensive trench is horrible. That is not going to be good against Nebraska and Minnesota. Those are the two games you have to get over this win total. Under 5.5 minus 120 is very nicely priced for us. I make it 5.1. It's a good under.
Yep. I'm around 4.9, so I agree. Under on your boy Burt. Another under I like. You mentioned Illinois winning close games last year with a good record. One that they didn't win was against Northwestern because they had 2 fumbles in 10 seconds that led to Northwestern touchdowns.
Amazing.
I had Illinois and I had Illinois in that game because Northwestern won every possible coin flip you can imagine last year. The Wildcats in David Braun's first year is now the full-time head coach, was the interim. After going 4-20 combined in 2021, 2022, they went 7-5, then won the bowl game to win 8 games. But it was damn lucky. They were 6-2 in 1 possession games, including their bowl win, plus 13 turnover margin. Let me just talk to you about some of these wins. Okay, their wins last year, they beat UTEP. Who cares? Sorry, Minor Nation. Minnesota in overtime, they trailed by 21 in the 4th quarter. They beat Howard by 3 at home. They were outgained by 100. Howard didn't even finish above 500 in FCS. They beat Maryland by 6, outgained, should have lost that game, Maryland being Maryland. They beat Purdue by 8. Guess what? Purdue outgained them by 115. We're playing a backup quarterback. Can't even remember the kid's name who was playing quarterback for Purdue. Beat Wisconsin. That was one of their good wins. They beat Illinois by 2 because of those 2 joke fumbles. I mean, it was just an absolute joke in their games last year. There's 7 wins. Their opponents went 8 of 18 on 4th down, turned it over 14 times, only forced 4 turnovers. Just an absolute joke. This Northwestern team, look, they got no help from the portal, no help from recruiting. They lost their quarterback, their best offensive lineman, 1 receiver, their best linebacker, 2 cornerbacks, a safety. This team's in trouble. I mean, you can find an under 5 out there, which is I did this morning. I project them 4.2. They were the losers of the Big Ten realignment. No more West. Top 25 strength of schedule. They face Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State, all the way from home. They only have 2 true Big Ten home games, which are going to be played not in their regular home field. It's going to be right on the lake. And then they also play like Ohio State and Wrigley, Illinois and Soldier Field. They got to start 3-0 with an easy non-con. They got Duke, Miami of Ohio. We'll see if Gabbert's healthy. Eastern Illinois, they could lose to Eastern Illinois. I'm not sure they do. They were extremely lucky last year. What does this team have? I mean, they lost their quarterbacks. They lost their best offensive lineman. Their D-line is decent. They lost Gallagher at linebacker. I'm worried about the cornerback position. Under. Everything went right for this team. I'd be shocked if they got to a bowl game going under 5.
Well, you're definitely going to want 5, not the 4.5 if you're gonna lay that. Because I do project this around 5. So I think there's a big difference when you get to 4.5. I like the hire of Zach Lujan, offensive coordinator, South Dakota State, 2-time national champions. Does he have the pieces to run what the Jackrabbits had? 12 personnel. They ran that more than any other grouping. They leveraged a lot of outside zone, power run concepts. And Cam Porter could be in for a big fantasy season, but what are they doing at quarterback? I mean, Brennan Sullivan hits the portal. He's going to have a backup, we think, for Iowa. Former Vanderbilt quarterback Mike Wright is there. We're not going to let him throw the ball, right? 1,300 yards in his career rushing. He has struggled, severe limitations in throwing the ball. Not really a part of Northwestern's DNA on offense, although I don't know what this new offensive coordinator wants to do. Wright has posted 15 big-time throws to 32 turnover-worthy plays. You can't let him throw the ball. That's his time during with Vanderbilt and with Mississippi State. Defensively, I love what Braun did. It was the reason why they did so well last year. They finished top 50 in stopping rush and pass explosives. Defense returns more than 70% of pressures, and a big part is Carmine Bastone and Richie Haggerty on the defensive line. At least they have that. In a college football world where everybody's struggling for defensive interior and defensive line help, Northwestern at least has a little bit of stability there. I see him favored in 5 games, although some of them are extremely short. Eastern Illinois, I've got him favored by 35. I'm not worried about that one, but small favorites over Miami, Ohio. Small favorites over Duke. Could get to 3. Illinois is on that schedule. I have no confidence in them. Could get to 4. Then you're looking at only 1 coin flip left. That's Indiana. Not really projecting that.
Ain't beating Signetti.
Right. But they can get to 4. I would say if you're going to take the win total here and you want to follow Stuck's advice, get the 5, pay the juice. Remember, a half a point in the win total is worth about 70 cents in the market. I see the 4.5 at about 120. So I would take under 5 up to about minus 160. I don't know what juice you're seeing, but it's worth it with this schedule, this team, and what they have coming back.
Today I can tell you what I got.
I think
I
150
got
needs to be your, yeah, I think 150 needs to be your
under
last number.
5 minus 125.
Oh, that's great. It's fantastic. So do that to one. I bet about minus 160, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd go like 150. All right, let's move on to Minnesota. The Gophers, after finishing 5-7, they won a bowl game because of their academic scores. So they actually finished 6-7 with a bowl win. You don't see that often. Win total sitting at 5.5. So the question is, do they get back to a bowl? Well, I guess they could. Maybe they go to a bowl at 5-7 again. So I shouldn't say that's the question in the betting market. A lot of returning production across the board, top 20, especially on defense. Callie McManus is gone, your boy. And they bring in Max Brosmer, someone who can actually throw it from New Hampshire. He threw for close to 3,500 yards last year. I am worried about the receivers, but I think it's an upgrade at quarterback. But this is, I mean, it's Minnesota. There's a question at center, but the rest of the offensive line's experience is huge. They're going to hand the ball to Darius Taylor a billion times. They brought in some reinforcements from the portal too at the running back. They're very solid there. The defense changes. New defensive coordinator Heatherman. They're moving away from Rossi, and they're going to Heatherman, attacking, blitzing style. Last year, they couldn't get a pass rush, and they just gave up too many explosives as a result. So the secondary had talent because they lost Newbin, who I loved at safety. They lost Jones at corner. So try and simplify this defense and also get some pressure via the blitz. That's the goal here. I think, if you look at the schedule, no more Big Ten West, but you avoid the top 2. However, you only get one of the bottom 5, and that's at Illinois. So, it's a mixed bag from the scheduling department. You have an easy non-con with Nevada, Rhode Island, and you start with UNC at home. I think the schedule and the win total probably comes down to the UNC game. So why tie up your money? If you like Minnesota, bet them against UNC. Because they lose that game and look bad, and Brosman looks bad, there's a chance they're dogs in their final 9 games. Like, as of right now, I have them favored against Maryland at home and like coin flip against Illinois. But if they lose that first game, Brosman looks bad. There's a chance. They should beat Rhode Island and Nevada, but they're dogs in their final 9. So you got to get the 6, and you're already 0-1 against UNC. Might be a tough task. So I think if you like Minnesota, you bet them against UNC. Obviously, they could still lose and get the 6, but I have them dogs in 7, 8 single-digit spreads. So there's a lot of close games here. What are your thoughts on the Gophers?
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting to the end of the last season for PJ Fleck. Only 5 wins. Didn't think they were going to make a bowl. Oh, shit. We did make a bowl thanks to our APR score. We got to go get a quarterback. Wasn't it the quarterback that was scheduled to get married and he had to hold it off so they go play this game? At the same time, Fleck, I don't know who left who first. Did Joe Rossi leave town or did Minnesota divorce themselves from Joe Rossi? I don't know. That was a little bit messy. He takes off and goes to Michigan State with Jonathan Smith. And then I'm at several different media days here through the month of July, and I'm told by 2 separate people that are literally within the program, I'm not going to say their position, who the teams were, PJ Fleck's agents were calling before they were going to that bowl game, calling about open positions, one on the West Coast. Let's just say Fleck was interested in moving on. And so that really sticks in my brain with this season coming up. Then he gets there at Big Ten Media Days. He filibusters, uses 15 minutes, screams into the microphone about leadership, and then he's off and he barely answers anybody's questions. I think Fleck is just coming down to the end. We do get Corey Heatherman in as DC. So we'll see how they go there. He wants to run a 3-3-5 personnel. He had 21% minimum blitz when he did do this job at Rutgers and JMU. But remove the complexities. He wants to remove all the complexities that Joe Rossi had. His system for defense was a little bit too complex. Heatherman wants to really turn it down from a playbook perspective and see if they can adapt to the base. You mentioned the quarterback, the New Hampshire quarterback, Max Brosmer, arrives with a Callie McManus gone, 29 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, but 10% of his passes. I know you don't know this stuff. Last year, Brosmer, his FCS passing, 10% of his passes were past 20 yards. We got another Drew Aller on our hands. So almost everything was within 20, 90% of his passes. So is Fleck going to come down from a 61%
90% of
rush
his
rate?
passes. That means it's going to be like that's 18 passes for the season with Minnesota.
Right.
How's his arm handing it off?
Well, he has 29 touchdowns, but his average depth of target was pretty low. We'll see if that plays out here. No clue with this offense. I mean, it's still out to see whether Kaliak Manis, it's Minnesota's fault or if it's his fault. But I think we got another Drew Aller here.
Swing game is UNC. Like I think that's what it comes
Yeah.
down to.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
I think for the win total, like, and then if they're better than they're supposed to be, they're probably going to beat UNC, and then they're going to go over. If they lose to UNC, they're probably going to go under.
I've got them projected at 4.9 wins, so I was ready to take the under without even having to hedge off any spot. But that definitely is a spot, and I think North Carolina, who I projected like -2 in that opener, I think they have too much with Amari and Hampton. I think they have way too much for what Minnesota can handle, but especially a new defense, learning a little bit different complications and wrinkles. They're going to be comfortably favored over Rhode Island and Nevada. They got a number of coin flips in like the toughest part of the schedule. UCLA, Illinois, Rutgers, Wisconsin. These are all teams that you would think Minnesota has a chance. I don't think they do. Even UCLA, because there's going to be such a heavy rush. That's going to be a problem for Minnesota to defend. All those games come on the road. Like they're winnable games. UCLA, Illinois, Rutgers, maybe Wisconsin. They're all on the road. Fleck is well. And here's something that you need to pay attention to. This doesn't affect the win total, but affects, I think, the direction that they're going. Fleck is way below 500 against the spread over the last 2 seasons against the Big Ten. He is not holding up at all to what odds makers think, isn't covering spreads whatsoever. His agent's making phone calls to take other jobs. I'm on the under 5.5. I don't even know if I'm going to hedge it out. I might just play North Carolina straight out and still bet the under 5.5, double down here and let it ride on this Minnesota roulette table.
Put a hole in the boat. I project 5.3. Stay away from me. I also project UCLA 5.3. A lot of change with UCLA. Deshaun Foster takes over, and the infamous presser at Big Ten Media Days. New offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy comes in from the NFL. New defensive coordinator, internal hire to replace Lynn. A lot of change here, and you have a brutal schedule. It is vicious. And by the way, you avoid Ohio State, and you avoid Michigan. Good news? Not really. You look at this schedule, you get 5 teams that won 10+ games last year. You do have 5 Big Ten home games, but one is USC, and also Oregon and Iowa are 2 of the others. I have them dogs in 8 games, but 5 are a touchdown or less. No free wins, and the schedule, just the travel is brutal. I mean, you start even at Hawaii. You got to go to LSU, non-con. It's tough. You're going across the country to Rutgers, and you have a road game against Nebraska the week after. You also have to go across the country for Penn State. So a lot of change here. You lose I'm worried about defensive end after you lose Latu and both Murphys. 4 or 5 starters gone in the secondary, plus your top linebacker. That secondary, by the way, last year, which was so good, also benefited from a ton of pressure, which you might not get. Garbers takes over at quarterback. Have some talent at wide receiver. Worried about the offensive line. Worried about the defensive line. Worried about Foster as a head coach. But I think this win total's come down. Numerically, I project them a touch over 5. So stay away from me. Any thoughts on UCLA?
Yeah, run away from this program as fast as possible. I think, there were reasons to fade these guys already. Chip Kelly just leaving in the middle of the night because he doesn't want to do head coaching stuff from NIL and portal and take on all that extra overhead. Deshaun Foster, I don't think ever had a goal to be a head coach. And then look at his hires. Ika Malo, he was the defensive line coach. He's now the defensive coordinator. Offensive coordinator is Eric Bieniemy. There's no former head coaches on this staff. And if you're going to do this as a first-time head coach, you need someone to help you organize. And I'm going to tell you right now, organization skills for Deshaun Foster is a real problem because it wasn't just on that stage at that podium. Because once you walk off that stage at that podium at Big Ten Media Day, you get followed by beat reporters, national writers. Then you got to go to a breakout. And it was a circus, an absolute circus. Literally stopped a breakout and took a phone call. I mean, it's just, and says, I'm not a rah-rah guy. And I'm thinking, well, Dave Aranda's not a rah-rah guy either, but he gets his team ready. this was a shock to everybody. With Chip Kelly leaving, and now this team has to go. And the word out on Eric Bieniemy, and I would always default to you and Chris and Sean when it comes to NFL stuff. But, I asked a simple question to a few people at Big Ten Media Day, like, why has Eric Bieniemy never moved on to another position after so many years at the Chiefs and interviewing for head coaching jobs? And they're like, he is fantastic in the coach's room, designing plays, getting, the offensive scheme ready, getting the offensive plan ready. But he can't, on the field as a coordinator, he can't remember plays. He's always got to look at his sheet. He can't give a quarterback 3 different options. Like, there's like a real logistics issue on the sideline with him. And that's the reason why he's failed all these interviews and hasn't really moved anywhere else. 1 year at the Commanders. Here we are. He's got Eric Bieniemy. So there's going to be a heavy rush attack here. TJ Harden's going to come back with 800 rushing yards. Poor numbers in yards after contact, and he just did not create missed tackles. There's just no juice here with TJ Harden. And Bieniemy and Foster, they're going to run 2-back sets as much as they can. I don't know who the other back is, and you're missing out on their best weapons on offense, which is Ethan Garbus throwing to J. Michael Sturdivant. Sturdivant, 70 targets a season ago, 36 balls with an average depth of target of 16 yards. Average depth of target, he's catching at 16 yards. That's crazy. But they're not going to be able to exploit that because that's not what this offense wants to run. As far as the defense goes, you expect some continuity coming in from Danton Lynn moving over to USC because Mallow is a member of his staff, the defensive line coach. So you're going to see, the nickel defense, you're going to see multiple defensive line fronts. They're going to run cover 1 and quarters. And UCLA was one of the most aggressive defenses in the nation last year. They sent blitz on 42% of snaps, but there's no Latu, and there's no Darius Masao on this squad. You're not going to, you can't send 42% of pressure if you're missing your top guys on the edge. Only 40% of their tackles and pressures return. So I see a major downstep. I could go through the schedule until I just project this at 4.2. The best spot on this schedule, and I've seen this a billion times and I can't wait for it. Timmy Chang told me in Vegas at Mountain West Media Days, they ain't showing nothing week 0 against Delaware State. 0. On the island, vanilla. But it is guns a-blazing when UCLA gets to town. And you want to look at that secondary, you want to look at what they got at the linebacker ranks, they're outside the top 10 projected for UCLA. What is Hawaii bringing to the table? Shager's going to be hitting Stephen McBride and Pofel Ashlock all day. This is such a bad trap for UCLA to run into. That you got a first-time coach ever who didn't even know he's going to get the job, a coordinator who's never been a head coach, and a defensive line coach who got promoted defensive coordinator, and you're going to take your entire squad to the island for your first game ever against a highly explosive pass offense of Hawaii. My favorite bet by far, Hawaii plus 13.5. Now, when Deshaun Foster got off the stage, that number got ripped down to 12.5. I make the game 12. I would almost venture to say the game closes like 11.5. I think it's getting shaped by getting moved up to 14.5. There's no reason for me to come into the UCLA other than you're waiting for limits to come out bigger and you can get that 14.5. I love Hawaii week 1. I've already bet it. I might bet it again. I like the money line plus 475. UCLA's got major problems.
Teams that play a game before the other team plays a game historically have been great bets. They played week 0 and then in their second week in week 1 against a team that hasn't played, usually great bets. Let's move on. Purdue win total 4.5, heavily juiced to the under. I project 3.8. I wanted to bet Purdue. They had bad injury luck last year. Hudson Card is back. I like Ryan Walters, defensive coordinator, year 2 of Harrell and Walters. But the problem is, I only project 3.8. I only been favored 2 times. They do face 4 of the bottom 5 in the conference, but 3 on the road. This is a brutal schedule. Only 4 Big Ten home games. They're favored and only 2, as I said. They face 5 of the top 8 in the Big Ten, including the top 3, plus Notre Dame, plus at Oregon State. They only have 1 free win on the schedule. Dogs at 7+7 times. I have questions about wide receiver. They lost everyone there. So this is just a stay away from me.
Yeah.
My gut says they'll probably pull off an upset, Spoilermaker style this year, and win 5 games, but I can't get there.
Yeah, the pieces don't fit here. There's a lot of talk about Hudson Card not being able to grasp Graham Harrell's air raid, which is going to have more 12 personnel with 2 tight end sets here. In this offense last year, his turnover-worthy play rate tripled. Something is not clicking here on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, ridiculous portal activity. Losing Nick Skirton to Texas A&M, that was just a shot in the heart. Ryan Walters is a good defensive coordinator coach. He had a good bit of steam coming in from Illinois taking this job, but they're getting raided by the portal all the time. So safety Dylan Thieneman is their best, probably the best freshman in Purdue history, freshman All-American. So I got under 2.5 here, plus 130. I just don't see any avenue for them to get to 3 wins in conference. Best shots would be Northwestern, Illinois, and Indiana. I don't see it happening against Indiana, definitely.
They brought some interesting names in the portal, but yeah, nothing for me there. And finally, Michigan State, win total 4.5 as we are recording this, heavily juiced to the over. Jonathan Smith era should be a big upgrade. Joe Rossi, we mentioned, is a new defensive coordinator. Expect as a run, it's going to be run heavy offense. He brought his really good offensive line coach, his offensive coordinator with him, Aiden Childs, highly prized recruit. He brought his center with him too, was really good. Run game should improve drastically, was basically non-existent last year. Everyone is back in the backfield. Wide receiver is a major question mark. It's an experienced D, but they need to improve against the pass. We'll see what Rossi can do. But a pretty good linebacker group, new defensive line. That the secondary has more experience now. Can they take the leap? I mean, they had a true frosh starting at cornerback last year. They do have a tough schedule. One of the 20 hardest schedules in the country. They face 4 of the top 5 in the Big Ten. They do have some, winnable home games, and you're at Illinois, you're at BC, which is winnable. They have some coin flips late, which, and after the brutal stretch, they have Ohio State at Oregon, Iowa at Michigan in the middle of the season. But they, the first 4, and then the last 4, if you expect Jonathan Smith is a good coach, they could be better. I just have questions in the trenches. I project 4.4. So, I guess I would lean under, but I trust Smith. Stay away from me on Sparty. Anything for you?
Trust him 100%, but not this season. I project him at 4. There's just too many questions here. And we just talked about Joe Rossi. He's running that 3-3-5 here, and how much of that is this defense going to be able to grasp? They are better in the back end than they are at the front end. If you don't have it in the trenches in this conference, you're probably going to get whacked. I don't know if Aiden Childs
only 30 career FBS starts on the offensive line too.
Yeah, and I don't know that, and that's telling me, is Aiden Childs, is he going to be the starter day one, or are you going to let this offense settle in and get some experience before you throw your guy who knows your system, knows your playbook, knows everything before you unleash him? Yeah, Montori Foster returns at wideout. He had 73 targets, but the offensive line is spotty. I just don't think you're going to take your star quarterback and throw him back there to get, his head whacked off in the first few games. So I got them as a favorite in just 2 games this season, 2 non-conference games against Florida Atlantic, Prairie View. Everything else is an uphill climb. Under has always been the play on this team, but it is the last time you're going to be able to fade Jonathan Smith for quite some time.
Yep. Special teams could be decent. But yeah, schedule's tough. Trenches are just brutal. Losing Barrow and Harmon to the portal in the spring really hurts, and their offensive line super inexperienced. All right, quick wrap up. Favorite bet. Just do a favorite over, favorite under, and a future if you want. I'll start. My favorite under. Favorite over is Indiana. Signetti, baby. Google me. Favorite under. I'll go Northwestern. Get that 5. Also like under on your boy Burt, and under Wisconsin. Try to get that 7. Favorite future. Michigan to miss the college football playoff. Colin?
I'm going Illinois on the under. You kind of mentioned Burr. That is my boy. The writing is on the wall, and big man is on his way out. Rutgers over 6.5 is at plus money. I love this team. I don't know what the ceiling is. Could be 8, could be 9 wins from a futures perspective. Yes, Ohio State to miss the playoffs, plus 450. I have it in my back pocket. Too many things going on here, and I do love Penn State to be a representative as a playoff team at minus 140, but Oregon is the team that's winning this conference at plus 210.
Love it. That'll do it for us. Thanks to Colin for joining me as always. Thanks to our producer, David, and Matt on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. Leave a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Welcome to our new BBOC channel. Make sure you subscribe there if you haven't already. What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there. We are in the grind. 18 teams down, all 18 in the Big Ten in under 2 hours. Love to see it. It's time to go get to work before we churn out the rest of these, and the season will be here before we know it. Thanks for tuning in. 5-star reviews help us out. I'll do some giveaways soon, by the way. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you all later. Cheers.
Peace out.